Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
You know, when I'm browsing over at Wondrium, I'm always getting into like brain science, how things work, how do we improve our thought processes. They have a series on CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. And I really enjoyed the series called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, Techniques for Retraining Your Brain. Streaming now on Wondrium. Now, if you're familiar with the Great Courses Plus, you already know Wondrium, same great service, bigger and better. WONDRIUM. And the series on cognitive behavioral therapy gets into dismantling the stressors in your life and managing anxiety and anger and how to forgive, or at least move on past an experience where you've been hurt, building healthy relationships. This is the kind of stuff you're going to find and so much more at Wondrium. It is literally one of the greatest resources I have found for learning on a huge host of subjects. Streaming video and audio content, I know you will love Wondrium, so I've got a special offer for my listeners. It's a free month trial of unlimited access. Just go to my special URL, wondrium.com/Seth. That's WONDRIUM.com/Seth. Just think about how much you will learn in a month. Go to wondrium.com/Seth. You know what the trolley problem is? It's a famous ethics experiment. In my own mind, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, maybe it's that hard. I don't know. But a train is barreling down the tracks, and then there's a fork in the tracks. On the left, tied down to the railroad tracks, there are 5 people. On the right, there is 1 person. And that train is going to hit somebody, and you control the lever. Do you make the train go left to kill the 5 people, or do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the 1? And you hit the lever to kill the 1 to save the 5. This is the famous trolley problem. This is the flavor of thought experiments we're going to be doing as I just ask the callers what they think. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a great chance to exercise our brains. And I hope it's going to be entertaining and fun to listen to. So let's not dilly-dally any longer. Let's go to the phones. 217. Tell me your name, my friend.
Charles the Heretic.
I appreciate you, Charles. We're talking about moral and ethical dilemmas. And I'm going to present a scenario. I just want to know what you think or what you would do. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. Apparently, this thought experiment is based on a true story. It was back in the 1880s. There were 2 British explorers, Dudley and Stevens, and they were shipwrecked with 2 other men. And I guess they were living on the shipwreck. And they were stranded. And one of the 4 was also the cabin boy. The cabin boy got really sick. He fell into a coma. It was assumed there was no way he was going to survive. Now, these 4 men did not have enough food. Specifically, the 3 conscious men didn't have enough food. Thinking that the cabin boy, there's no way he's going to survive. They wanted to kill him and eat his body so that they could survive themselves. When they were rescued after doing this, according to the story, they took these 3 guys to court and got a very lenient sentence because, hey, they were just trying not to die. The ethical dilemma is this. If you were on the shipwreck, the cabin boy had gotten really ill, he's in a coma, you're thinking there's no way he's ever going to come out, he's probably just a few days from dying. Would you finish him off and use him as a food source to survive yourself? Charles.
Well, there was another episode in the British Navy where a ship did have a wreck and 3 guys were stuck in a lifeboat. And they didn't have any way of acquiring fish or anything like that. So what they did is they chopped off a leg of one guy, amputated a leg, and ate that. I would go that route, removing elements of the boy's body, instead of just outright just killing him.
So you would do a little surgery. You would just sort of...
Yeah.
All right. Well, of course, the next question has to be, forgive me for being macabre, but I mean, what part of the body sounds delicious to you, Charles? Or most nutritious is what I'm asking you.
I would go with the legs first before I would do anything else. Below the hips, that being the largest part of the body, that isn't 100% absolutely necessary for the kid's survival.
And then the cabin boy wakes up. Let's say there's a 0.0001% he wakes up, but he actually does. You got some explaining to do, Charles.
Yes, and I would explain it to him.
Well, wait, how do you explain it to him? I'm sorry, they put me on a diet of lean proteins, kid. There's nothing else to do.
I would tell him the truth. We were starving. We thought you were going to die.
All right.
We knew you would, if you did die, you would be able to survive without that part of your body.
An interesting solution to the ethical dilemma, Charles. And already the chat room is arguing with itself over which part of the body they would dine upon first. Charles, I appreciate you playing along, man. And I hope I'm not the cabin boy on your ship, is all I'm saying. Yeah. Oh, that scenario just is a little sketchy. Yeah, just a little sketchy. So you take care of yourself, brother.
You too.
All right. See you later. I just got a flash. I was thinking there's a movie. The line is in my mind. Lord of the Rings. From Lord of the Rings, one of the films where the hobbits were kidnapped and they're walking along with the evil army, and the evil army is starving on their journey, and somebody wants to eat the hobbits. Can we eat the hobbits? No, you can't eat the hobbits. And one of them looks at the other one and he says, "What about their legs? They don't need them." That's what the cabin boy scenario sounds like to me. What about their legs? They don't need them. The whole scenario also reminds me of that story about the rugby team back in 1972. They made a movie about it with Ethan Hawke. They're flying to Chile. They're going to play a rugby game, but this plane that they're on crashes in the Andes, and there's like 45 people on board, and several people do not survive. And they're stuck up there in the mountains for 2 months, and they run out of food. So they're melting snow to drink water. But at one point, they're so desperate to try to survive this encounter that they eat pieces of the dead. Again, I'm not trying to gross you out. We're talking about the ethical dilemma. When they got back, at first, they were just vilified for being cannibals. How could you do this? How inhuman this act is. But after the dust settled and passions began to subside, I think people started to realize that, hey, they did what they had to do. It's not like they were using that part anyway, right? So, yes, the film is called Alive. It released, I think, back in the early 1990s, if you are interested. I've got 803. Hi, what's your name?
Dees.
Before
we go into the dilemma, I want to mention something to you.
Yeah.
There is another channel called Ask a Mortician, done by Caitlin Doty.
Yeah, I've had her on the show.
She's covered that. Oh, you have? Okay. So she's actually covered the Andes plane crash, and given a very interesting story behind Moby Dick that relates to that last question of yours. I would highly recommend checking those out.
I love Caitlin Doty. I think she's so freaking smart. It was a real catch to get her on the broadcast because everybody's pawing at her, and I'm not a morbid person, but I'm very interested in the subject of death, and I think it's stigmatized in this country so much that I think it's important we destigmatize it and just talk about it, So she's written this new book called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And I couldn't resist. I'm like, you got to come and talk about this stuff for an hour. It's in the archive if anybody's interested. Dees, the scenario I'm throwing at you goes like this, okay? The aliens arrive. They visit you personally, Dees, and they bestow upon you the ability to be invisible at will. You can go anywhere, and you will not be seen. Now, you're a moral creature. You are strongly convinced that stealing is wrong. Just down the road, there's a drug cartel, and they set up shop. And you realize that you could turn invisible. You could easily walk into the cartel headquarters and steal millions of dollars from this criminal organization. Would you, an opponent of stealing, actually steal from the cartel?
Now, personally, in this case, I don't think I would have a problem stealing from that cartel, but I think I'd be more interested in making sure that I stole some information that I could give to the cops to help them break them up and get them out of there, with a small profit for myself. But if I was taking the mindset of strictly being an opponent of theft,
Well, you don't have to be strictly an opponent of theft. I was just saying you and I in our everyday lives, we don't steal from our fellow human beings. We're not thieves in that way, but it doesn't mean there might not be a situational.
General,
so what would you do kind of thing? WWYD.
Maybe in this case, redistribute some of those funds, not only personally, but to some others in need. But mostly make sure that the authorities who can do something about a cartel like that are empowered to do so.
I love doing a show like this for the skeptical community because as I glanced down into the chat, someone asked the obvious question, would whatever I was stealing become invisible too? Which is logistically a totally, that's a legit question. Someone looks at the security cams and they see 1.5 million walking itself through the gate. I'm totally busted, even if I'm invisible myself. I think that's a part of the story that's missing. We have to set that. I would hope maybe I could bring it into my little invisible aura. But that's an interesting question. You skeptics, you nailed it. You did really good. I was talking to Natalie about this, Dees, and I think I'm with you. I wouldn't steal from my fellow human beings who were making an honest wage and steal in that way. And I don't want to be the person who would ever try to excuse theft. But if there was an organization like the freaking mob or a drug cartel or something doing monumental harm, my conscience would be just fine sneaking in and removing some of their resources. And yeah, you could reallocate it into your community. You could give it to the disadvantaged. You could give to charity. We'd give to all kind of rescues, Doctors Without Borders and Humane Society, etc., and keep some extra to perhaps give ourselves some security for the rest of our lives. I think I would sleep like a baby if I stole from the cartel in that way, provided they weren't going to come and give me a Colombian necktie kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit of Robin Hood action would be, I think, in order there. It might wind up prompting some superstitious legends, but I think that's worth the cost.
You could be the ghost story that everybody tells around the campfire every Halloween, the ghost that steals from the cartel. Dees, thanks for calling. Thanks for playing along, okay?
Have a wonderful day.
All right, see ya. An absolutist would say, never steal. You never steal. And I understand that, and I think I would want to defend that and stand behind it. But if I'm really being honest with you, if it's a criminal enterprise that's going to do only horrible things with the money anyway, and I could get away with it and not worry about the threat, I kind of think I would go in and steal the millions. Steal it. Right? Just take that resource away from them, and then I trust myself, my own compass enough to know that I would do good things with it. Good for others, good for me and my family. Does that make me a hypocrite when I say that I think we should live honest, noble lives and we shouldn't steal from our fellow human beings? Or is it situational, the ethical dilemma? 225. Hi, who's this?
My name is Tristan.
Tristan. This question was posed in an ethical dilemma back in 1974 by a philosopher. His name was Robert Nozick. I guess I'm pronouncing it right. Nozick. A philosopher presented this dilemma. He was an opponent of hedonism, which means you place pleasure above all other values, right? No matter what happens, I am interested first in my own pleasure, hedonism. And he was an opponent of that mentality. So he asked this question. He said, imagine a machine that would allow you to experience anything you want, anytime you want, on any terms you want. This is an experience machine that could bring to life your greatest pleasures and desires at any time. But the fear is that the machine would be so intoxicating, so much better than the real world, that you might never want to unplug. Plus, you'd have the simulation of doing things, but you wouldn't really be doing them. The question is, would you plug yourself into the machine?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. I would like to say no. I mean, I think that we already kind of have this problem in the real world, right? Like people get, addicted to all sorts of things for their own pleasure. I mean, you got pornography, gambling. I would say no, just on the grounds of what I already know. That, yeah, I think that tends to do more harm than good.
In the world of virtual reality, though, you're right. We're already seeing people who find greater satisfaction in living in kind of a faux reality. But who's to say that that's not a legitimate way to find happiness? If you can plug into the Matrix and it's the Matrix and you can apparently unplug at will. I mean, if it gets you high, makes you happy, who cares? It could be argued that way, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, who's to say we're not already living in some kind of virtual reality like that, right? Like, I don't want to get into, conspiracy theory territory. I'm just saying we can't prove we're not, right? So
go ahead. No, get philosophical.
Right?
Let's jump into the brain in a vat thing. I mean, we can't prove we're already not living in the Matrix, right?
Right. And so I think if you were strong-willed enough, yeah, you probably could do this. If you could say, okay, I can disconnect from this thing anytime I want, right? If the danger is that you become addicted and you're like, wow, this is so great, I can experience anything that I want. There's something to be said, I think, for being able to experience things that you might not be brave enough to do in real life, right? Like, I'd probably never go skydiving, but that'd be cool if I knew that I could do it and didn't really have to worry about potentially dying if something goes wrong, right? So, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I guess I don't have a good answer.
That's the point of these discussions.
Right, yeah.
There often is no clear-cut answer. We talk about addiction, though. If you get that much of a rush, I just picture somebody plugs in, and before you know it, everything else in their real world begins to go by the wayside. Your life partner, you stop paying attention maybe to your kids. You start calling into work. Tasks around the house aren't getting done. You don't really have any forward motion in your real life because you've invested everything in the virtual one. That obviously is a potential pitfall or problem that I think some would worry about.
Oh, definitely. And if we're talking about, if I understood you correctly, and the idea behind this is that you can sort of configure this machine to give you whatever you want, that's where you could really potentially get into some addictive type of behavior, right? Because there's all kinds of things that I think everybody can agree we'd all like to experience in life that we probably never will or won't for whatever reason. And yeah, if you can make this machine that gives you all this great stuff out of life that, most people don't just go around just experiencing awesome things all the time. You know what I mean? So it just, something about that seems a little unnatural to me.
You said something that resonated when you said, hey, you can stop whenever you want. That sounds very addict to me. Hey, look, I'm a drinker, but I can stop whenever I want. I'm using Coke, but I can stop whenever I want. I'm using VR. I'm using the experience machine. I could stop whenever I want. There is an echo of that in there, but it doesn't seem quite the same. It's not necessarily a chemical dependence unless you're talking about the endorphin rush, the pleasure responses of the brain acting organically without a chemical being injected in. So I feel like it's a little bit apples and oranges. I'm not trying to be a politician on this sucker. I'm not trying to play both sides, even though I really I end up playing both sides because I can argue it both ways.
Nope, I agree with you. That's what, I think like anything else, it's got its pros and cons. I think, theoretically, if such a thing did exist, some people probably could use it responsibly and some people would use it irresponsibly. I think it probably comes down to what kind of a person you are. And maybe some people would love it. Maybe some people have such a bad existence that they would love to be able to hop in this machine and live out the rest of their days in bliss. They say ignorance is bliss. But I think for me, there would be this idea in the back of my head that, this isn't real, So I don't know. It's an interesting question. Sorry, I couldn't give you a straight...
It's an interesting answer. Look, I don't need an A-B, black-white, binary answer. I like the situational stuff. I like the nuanced stuff. So you did great. Tristan, thanks so much for calling, my friend.
Thank you, Seth.
All right, see you. Reminiscent of one of my favorite films, Inception, the Christopher Nolan film that stars Leonardo DiCaprio. DiCaprio's in town right now. He's in my home city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he has been for several weeks. They're shooting the new Martin Scorsese film, and there are DiCaprio sightings. Oh, we saw him here. He was eating at this restaurant, and he and Robert De Niro visited a museum. And so, they were photographed at the museum and people are like, where do you think they'll go next? And somebody said that DiCaprio actually bought a $1 million house. And you can get a lot of house for the money in this part of the country. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he had bought himself something, invested in real estate or whatever. I'm a huge DiCaprio fan. I know a lot of people don't get it or get him, and that's fine. It's all a subjective thing. But I've just become convinced there's almost nothing he can't do, except for the Australian accent in Blood Diamond. I didn't buy that. But, he's great. He was great in Titanic. He was great in Gangs of New York. He was great in The Aviator. He was great in Catch Me If You Can. He was great in The Wolf of Wall Street. And he was great in Inception. And Inception gets into this sort of mind-bending idea. What if you could plug into a faux reality that you build yourself? You have an architect that builds this reality any way you want it. And you don't have to choose because whatever it is that you want, you can make happen. It's not like I want to live in the mountains or I want to live on the beach. In the virtual world, you can have a beach with mountains on it and you can make anything you want. But it becomes hard to differentiate between the real world and the fantasy world. Is that healthy or unhealthy? Is it, something where it doesn't really matter because perception is reality and your brain starts to melt over all this stuff. Speaking of virtual reality, at the recommendation of No Illusions over at Scathing Atheist, I bought an Oculus Quest 2 headset. Now, I don't play a ton of video games. And I know nothing about VR. But I went ahead and bought one, which is a kind of a risk for a guy like me because I am the most motion sick person I've ever met. I took a cruise once, 20 years ago, and after day 2 of the storms and the waves and the rocking of the ship, I was on my hands and knees praying for merciful death. Okay? So I worry a lot about motion sickness with VR. And of course, they told me, well, the games are rated comfortable, moderate, or intense. So you can gauge whether or not it will make you motion sick. You can get in front of that. So far, I've only played I played poker. It sounds stupid for VR. It's totally not. It's totally not. You sit down at a virtual table and the controllers actually vibrate like you're picking up poker chips, and when you move cards, and it's like being at a virtual table. But the environment is a place where you'd never exist or would never exist in real life. It can be a spaceship or a western town back in the 1800s, or, you can make it be whatever you want to be. And I began to see, if somebody was unhappy in their regular life, it would be very, very, very probable that they would look forward to the opportunity to plug into a place where things were better. Things were happier. They were more fulfilled. They were able to perhaps be the people they had always wanted to be. Another great example of this is episode 1 of season 4 of Black Mirror. What's that episode called? I got to look it up. Hang on. Black Mirror, season 4, episode 1. It stars Jesse Plemons from Breaking Bad. It's called the USS Callister. And it's about a guy who plugs into like a classic Star Trek scenario where he gets to be the captain. And he is an abusive son of a bitch. He is an absolute horror of a human being. And the simulations in this virtual environment can't do anything about it. He can be as awful as he wants, and they're stuck living this out every single day. And it's a brilliant hour. Black Mirror, season 4, episode 1. It's called USS Callister. Forgive the digression. Let's go back to the phones. This is in my home state, area code 405. Hi, who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is Michael.
Michael, thanks for calling. I've got a scenario. Are you ready?
I am.
The philosopher Philippa Foot actually posed this scenario. It's a little bit like the trolley problem. There are 5 patients. Each of the patients has a terminal disease. They're all dying, but they're dying from a failure of a different organ. One person has heart failure, another has lung failure, etc. Each of the 5 is going to die of organ failure, each one of a different organ. Okay? No way any of the 5 will survive, but it's discovered that there is another person out there who is totally healthy, who is a donor match for all 5 people. 5 organ transplants, 5 people would be saved, but for this to happen, you would have to sacrifice the one healthy person. So, if you do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, would you kill the one to save the 5?
What does the one say?
It doesn't matter what they say. If it's up to you, would you?
Absolutely does. If they say yes, I'll do it. If they say no, I won't.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's
the many may outweigh the needs of the few, but they don't outweigh bodily autonomy.
Well, that's the answer to your question then. I mean, so for you, it would be about consent, which I would hope would be the case.
Yep.
But if you're playing God and you get to make the decision, I mean, you could make it whether they consent or... No. I'm saying if, in my scenario, in this world, you could make the decision whether or not they consented or not. But in your scenario, you would wait for consent before you would make a move.
Yeah.
That was easy enough. Thanks so much for calling.
Have a good one.
All right. See you later. Somebody in the chat, Anna, had a great question. Why are the organs failing? Was it due to cause and effect, bad behavior? Would the living take care of the replacement? I'm not sure I understand that part of the question. Would the living take care of the replacement? I would assume in the scenario that they're all dying of some sort of I hate the term act of God, but it's not that they went out and, essentially torched their internal organs with destructive chemicals or hideous decisions. This is something that was beyond their control. But you skeptics, you're always complicating things, and that's why I love you. 203, hi, who's this?
This is Tyler. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Tyler, I've got one that's, it's not an ethical dilemma, but it's...
Seth, can I make a request?
Yeah.
Can I go back to one? The cartel one.
Yeah.
On the cartel thing, I think you can argue it from both ways, and I could give you kind of like similar examples historically. So like if you're being basically oppressed, like you're a subject under the cartel regime, right? I think you can make an argument that not only should you steal, you sort of have a moral obligation to steal, and you have to be able to justify that because you can't let people walk over you, right?
You see stealing from the cartel as a liberation exercise. It's a way to be emancipated from your oppressors.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I'm glad we tackled the heavy one first because this little scenario I'm going to toss at you now is extremely frivolous and lightweight. I just thought it was interesting. Okay, cool. It's called the snail problem. You and a super intelligent snail both get $1 million and you both become immortal. Okay? But at any time in your life...
that's not a good combination.
At any time in your life, if the snail ever touches you, you will die. The snail always knows where you are, and it's always slowly crawling in your direction. If this was the case, what would you do?
I would put the snail on a treadmill. Boom.
Oh my God, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's so good. I've heard it. I've heard that people would do that with zombies. Like if the zombies were coming at their houses, they would just put treadmills all around so the zombies would simply shamble in place forever.
Didn't they do that in Shaun of the Dead or whatever, that movie? Or they locked him up, right?
I don't know. You win the day on treadmill. That's one of my favorite things I've heard this week. I'm going to move on. Thanks for calling, man. Thanks for playing along.
Thank you.
See you later. A treadmill for the snail. Is there a setting? How fast or slow do snails crawl? Hang on. Hold, please. How slow do snails? God, you can Google anything in this world. From the BBC, snails can travel at a relatively speedy 1 meter per hour. So I'm trying to think if you were to, using special gloves, fly the snail. Well, actually, you could fly the snail to another continent and the snail would not be able to traverse the ocean, so you would be safe. Unless the snail was somehow able to hold its breath for thousands of years as it... I don't know. I have questions about this. Let's go back to 208. Who's this?
Brian. I have to make a comment, about that snail thing. It's like, I'd probably put was it snails or slugs? Or maybe it's both of them that you put salt on them, they die.
Yeah, somebody in the chat had said that. That's dark, but I guess you could pour salt on it. Someone else said hamster wheel, and a third person said they would shoot it into space. They would put the snail on a rocket and they would send it off into space.
Yeah.
So it would never, even if it crawled toward you at a meter an hour or whatever, the trajectory of going out into the cosmos, it would never make it back.
I got to make a little comment here too. Is that I wish I discovered your show a few years ago when you did that Preying on the Disabled show, because I've been blind since birth, and I've got a few stories that I could have shared.
We may have to cover the topic again sometime.
Yeah.
The scenario here I'm going to throw at you, my friend. Actually, I think this one might be pretty easy, but it's an interesting scenario, okay? This idea that we need to be telling the truth to be honest human beings. This is our hypothetical. There's an abused spouse. She shows up on your doorstep. She's in desperate need of shelter and safety. So you open the door and you let her come in and you say, look, go upstairs, go to the guest room, lock the door. I'm going to lock this front door. Right? You're trying to keep her safe. And a few minutes later, doorbell rings. It's the abusive husband. And he says, hey, have you seen my wife? If you consider yourself a truthful, honest person, would you say to the guy, yeah, she's here. Your wife is upstairs. Doesn't mean you let him in. Doesn't mean that you give him any access. Doesn't mean you don't stand your ground. But you won't lie. You say, yeah, she's here. What are you going to do about it? Right? Or is the moral thing to do to eliminate the threat and say, no, she's not here. In fact, I haven't seen her in a week. How would you handle the abusive spouse at the door looking for his partner?
Well, I have, not from personal experience, thank goodness, but I have a pretty deep-seated hatred of abusive people, so I would be, fuck no.
I think I agree. I mean, in fact, I know I agree. There's no way. Your number one priority in that moment is to eliminate the threat. And then your ass is on the phone with 911.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, that one wasn't all that complicated. Actually, I'm still thinking about the snails. But, that's just how my little brain works. I think everybody in the chat is saying the same thing. Everybody in the chat saying, we just lie and get that dude out of there because the first priority is to protect the life and safety of the woman upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
Well, honestly, I'm glad to know there's a moral person out there who would do whatever it took to keep their fellow human beings safe. So thanks so much for calling.
Certainly do my best. That's for damn sure.
All right. See you later.
Yeah.
You atheists, you sad, rudderless agents of Beelzebub, is it possible, from what we've heard so far, that you indeed are moral creatures? More scenarios and more of your calls coming up next. Just FYI, if you're interested in getting an autographed copy of any of my books, they are listed on my personal website, and I'd love the chance to sign one for you. The books are Deconverted, which is the story of my extraction from Christianity and evangelicalism. Sacred Cows is kind of a romp around the world's most bizarre belief systems, or many of them, and I relate them to the mainstream religions. And my most recent, Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian, I got them in paperback and hardcover. Would love a chance to sign one personalized to you or someone you love. You can find that option on my personal website, along with a webpage specifically dedicated to my dogs, SethAndrews.com. Okay, we're talking about moral dilemmas, variations on the trolley problem, as we go back to the phones. 816. Hi, who's this?
This is Eric.
Hi, Eric. We're doing ethical dilemmas today. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. There's a terrorist. He's placed a nuclear bomb somewhere in your city. The timer's ticking. Wherever it is, whenever it goes off, the destruction is going to be pretty much complete. Massive loss of life, buildings leveled, nuclear fallout, burning skin and infecting people, radiation sickness. It's just going to be unbelievable pandemonium and horribleness. This terrorist has ensured that his bomb is going to go off in the next 24 hours. But you have captured him. He refuses to talk, and you get desperate. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives are at stake. The ethical challenge I have for you is this. Would you torture the terrorist to get him to talk?
I guess basically my straight up answer would have to be yes. I mean, that's a lot on the line for one person, especially if I know factually that he has to be the one to have done the bomb planting. I mean, there's not much else I can do to avoid.
When I say the word torture, what pops into your mind? I hate the word comfortable because it's not appropriate, but what would you do?
Well, I guess you'd have to go to the classic and just waterboard his ass.
You would waterboard him to try to extract the information?
Yeah, from what I've read on the internet, it seems to be a very effective method without actually having to go to the extent of cutting off an arm. But if it means saving a lot of people, yeah, I think I'd push myself to whatever extent it would take.
Interesting answer to an interesting question. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of that Christopher Hitchens video. I feel like I'm always referencing Hitchens. I've been watching a lot of his videos lately. But he allowed himself to get waterboarded doing research for an article for Vanity Fair. This was back in 2008, and there is video on YouTube. Christopher Hitchens gets waterboarded, and he allowed himself to sort of be faux kidnapped by these guys wearing black masks, and they waterboarded him, and they gave him this little device that he held in his hand, and you squeeze it, and at any moment, if it becomes unbearable, you just release your hand, and they know to stop. And Christopher Hitchens said something really, really sobering. He said, waterboarding doesn't simulate drowning. He said, you are drowning. And of course, after Gitmo and regarding all the terrorists and whatnot, we saw that actually torture is not effective. Waterboarding is not effective in extracting information because the torturee will ultimately say whatever they think you want to hear to make the pain stop, to make the suffering stop. There's a great film about this based on a book. It's called The Report that I highly recommend. But beyond all that, I really think that the torture of other human beings says more about us than it says about them. If I torture a terrorist, I just can't escape this idea that it really is a referendum on me and my own humanity. Am I willing to lay that humanity down on the altar? You know, am I willing to just give it all up? What does that say about me if I am willing to become a torturer? That's kind of where I fall. Where do you fall on this ethical dilemma? 307, hi. Who's this?
Asher.
This is not an ethical dilemma as much as it is a philosophical question. And this is a popular one that I had to include. In Star Trek, you beam. The transporter takes the molecules in your body and it replicates them at your destination. But if your molecules are merely being replicated, is the person who lands at the landing party you, or is it a copy of you? How would you respond?
I mean, I would probably say it's a copy of you, though. I suppose that's a hard one to say because there's no way to tell from outside, you know. The person who lands on the transporter is going to behave exactly the same as the person who went on, but I suppose the question is it the same consciousness as the person who was originally transported?
How would you define consciousness? This is a huge philosophical question, but let's throw it out there and chew on it for a second. What is consciousness?
Well, I suppose to the best of my knowledge, consciousness is what's going on in your brain in terms of the chemical reactions that make you you. But with this, in theory, your brain's going to be working the same. You're going to have the same, it's going to behave exactly the same, but the you that is thinking, would your experience end at the transporter?
All of the brain would be replicated, which includes the part of the brain that stores memory. So I think it would be complete as far as the human machine is concerned.
It would still read to me as a copy because I don't know.
I love this question for that reason. Yeah, I think when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about awareness from without and within consciousness. But given the fact that, as I understand it, every cell in the human body will die and be replaced within 7 years, it could be argued that I am not the same person. I'm a different person totally physically than I was when I was, say, 35. And that person was totally different than the Seth who was 28, etc. And then part of me thinks if my consciousness or my life, my actions, my personality, my experiences, my memories, my hopes, my dreams, if all of those are coded into a new mechanism or machine, a new host, I would think it's still me. So I tend to lean on, yeah, you killed my body and reconstituted me, but me is still going to be me. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I suppose that does make sense with the fact that, I mean, I suppose I don't really have an argument against what you're saying. I suppose I agree with that that because we're already doing that same sort of replacement over a long period of time, and we're still considered the same person, one could say that being transported is just, you're still the same person because of how quickly it happened. It doesn't matter that it happened over several seconds as compared to 7 years. It's doing the same thing, and we're still considered the same person. So I suppose you are the same person.
I've heard there are college professors who actually use this scenario in their philosophy classes, and I'd be curious to see what their students say. Been fun, though. Thanks for calling the show and participating. Much appreciated.
Have a great day.
Yeah. Someone in the chat disagreed with the 7 year of the cells dying thing, and I might very well be wrong on that. So feel free to correct me if it's not true that every cell in the body is replaced within 7 years. I'm doing that off the cuff. Again, it's more of a philosophical question, and I very well might have gotten that data wrong. But I think the question still remains. If a cell is replaced with another cell, that first cell is dead, meaning that am I a new person? I don't know. I have questions about that. 801. Hi, thanks for waiting on me. Who's this?
My name is Taylor. How are you, Seth?
Taylor, I'm well. Thanks for calling the broadcast. Much appreciated. I've got a scenario for you. Would you like to hear what it is?
Yes, sir. I'd love to.
You are a heart surgeon. A patient walks into your office with a number of symptoms that you immediately recognize. You know that your patient has heart failure, okay? All of a sudden, your patient collapses on the floor right there in the examination room right in front of you. The patient falls unconscious, and you know that this person's going to die without an artificial heart. You have the tools and technology to do the surgery and save his life. But as he fell down to the floor, he was holding his wallet. Out of his wallet pops a small medical card that says, for religious reasons, he refuses to have anything synthetic put in his body. If you don't install the artificial heart, the man will never wake up. Do you conduct the procedure, or do you abide by his religious objections on the card and cancel the operation?
That's an interesting question.
That's the point. It's interesting. What do you need a second to think about it? I don't mind a bit.
No, sir. I think I've got an answer for you. I would abide by his personal beliefs. I mean, I grew up watching Terminator 2, so I can definitely understand hatred of machine kind.
Hold on. What does T2 have to do with a heart patient? What?
Well, because if it's an artificial heart, right? I mean, it's not an artificial intelligence. It was more of a joke, but some people don't, because it's not natural, right? So they don't necessarily want a prosthetic. They might prefer like a clone tissue or something like that.
So you would not do the procedure. You would abide by his wishes and let him die.
If that's what he wants. Well, actually, I think I might have to perform the surgery because you don't know if he put that card there. Somebody else could have put that there, and this heart failure could be the symptom of a poisoning. So you might have to perform the surgery, save his life, and then get his testimony, and then deal with the consequences from there.
Someone could have snuck into his bedroom at night and slipped the card into his wallet. I mean, you just never know who would have
He could be the president. He could be a cartel member. You don't know.
Organ donor card into his. I don't know. That's interesting. That's a fun scenario to chew on, though, and I appreciate you having that conversation with me. You take care of yourself.
Yes, sir. Oh, real quick, can I go back to a previous scenario?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the teleportation one. I was sitting here thinking, I was like, because to me it seems obvious because I wrote a horror novel, and the basic premise is that the aliens come take people from all kinds of different planets, and they make the aliens fight to the death like gladiators. But to do that in a way that's safe for the viewers, they use teleportation. And to me, I had to think about this a lot. So if you take somebody apart, every single particle, and then you reassemble those exact same particles in the exact same positions in a new location, then to me, you're the same person. But if they take you apart into particles and then put you into like a meat soup to reconstitute you when you come back, and then there's a meat soup on the other side, and they build you out of that, then I guess you would be a clone. And then about your idea about your cells being replaced, your bone cells are replaced about every 7 years. And like you have entirely new skin every 2 weeks. So really, you're just a constantly changing iteration of clones. You see yourself as the same person day to day, but you're slightly different. It's like that Greek thought experiment about the boat, and you change a different part every day until the entire boat has been replaced. Is it the same boat you started with? Some people would say no, but I would say yes in a transitional sense. It's like it's not the same, it's not different. There's an in-between, and I kind of see it that way.
Fair enough. Appreciate you, my friend. Take care of yourself.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, see you later. Back to the guy with the medical card. I struggled with this one because the person with the medical card is a victim of bad ideas, brainwashed. But in my mind, and this is just where I land at this moment, in my mind, I think if you're going to walk into my office with a card that says, "Do not save me," I think I would not do the procedure. Not just because of lawsuits, malpractice, let's say his church comes after me in the court system, etc. If you're going to walk into me and say, "Don't help me," or "Don't help me in the way that's going to be the most effective," and you play the religion card, I kind of think I wouldn't do the procedure. I don't know. I don't think I'd do it. That's a close one for me. That's tough. When you see them as victims of brainwashing and you are a proponent of human life, but you also know that, if somebody walks in and just says it, "Don't do it. If this happens," you're like, all right, fine. It's your call. Have a nice day. I've got a whole waiting room full of patients. 256. Hi, who's this?
My name is Audra.
Hi, Audra. We're doing some ethical dilemmas. Would you like to hear one? Would you like to address one?
I would, and I was actually thinking about the medical one.
Yeah.
And my thought process was I would almost rather do it because you can always allow them to take themselves off life support if they want to stop the synthetic art.
So you allow them to wake up in recovery and you say, "Okay, look, I went ahead and did it." And they're like, "Oh, you son of a bitch, I can't believe you violated my rights." And then you just walk over to the wall and go click. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, just be like, "Well, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but I wanted you to have the option since we didn't have a verbal conversation and I just saw a card. I wanted to get your verbal consent."
That's not bad. That's not bad. Hey, and when he says no, you just, "Hey, Bobby, go over there and pull that plug out of the wall with you." I mean, okay. I mean, who's going to know? Who's going to know? I'm just saying. Here's my scenario. It goes like this. It's actually a two-part scenario. There's a guy who's wearing a $1,000 suit. All right. He's pretty well off, very well to do. In fact, he's wearing a suit worth $1,000 and he's walking this path over next to the beach. And all of a sudden he looks out and he sees there's a child that's drowning in the ocean. Child being dragged away by the currents. "Help me, please, help me." The man does not have time to take off his $1,000 suit. Is he morally obliged to ruin the suit and jump into the salt water to save the child? I'll start there. What do you think?
I feel like I definitely would. And I think Matt Dillahunty uses the phrase where it's like being a vegan isn't a moral requirement, but it's a moral benefit. Or I can't think of the terminology.
Prerogative,
but
probably.
Yeah. And I think obviously everyone would think the right option is dive in, ruin the suit, and get the child.
Yeah.
I don't think he's required, but he's evil if he doesn't.
Yeah, I think morally obligated was the word. Okay, well, this brings me to part 2, and I think this is where things get really interesting, okay? That same guy does not go to the beach. There's no drowning child. He's up late at night at home. He's watching TV. There's a commercial on TV that says a $1,000 donation would save the life of a starving child in a third world village. The man does some homework and he realizes this relief organization is totally legit and that the money will in fact go to save the life of the child. If that man was expected to sacrifice a $1,000 suit and jump into the ocean for the drowning child, is he then morally obligated to send $1,000 in cash to save the starving child in the third world village? What do you think?
I think it's the same situation where he doesn't have to, but he's evil if he doesn't. Because I feel like if you have the resources and understand there's a checkbox to save someone, you should just do it. Especially if it's not putting yourself at a detriment that would, impede your own livelihood or what have you.
So you don't see a distinction between rushing into the ocean with the expensive suit or being a person of means, knowing there's $1,000 need to save the life of a child. For you, it's about the same.
It's about the same, and I would even say it's nearly the exact same if someone else has already done the homework and here's a checkbox you can do to save a child. If you're having to scour the world trying to find ways to use your resources to save people, that's a little bit different. Whereas I feel like if it's presented with you, save a child for $1,000 in two different scenarios, it's the same dilemma.
Fair enough. Interesting answer to the question. Thanks for being a part of it.
No problem. Thanks.
See you later. Bye. In the chat, I'm seeing someone's challenging me on my phrasing of being morally obligated. I stand by that. Someone else said moral imperative. Fine. I mean, we're not obligated, we're not under somebody's boot, required to do something. Someone can't force someone else to be moral. But I think as humanists, we're talking about an obligation we have to our fellow human beings, to society, to eliminate or at least reduce suffering, and to be agents of rescue. So that's the spirit in which I use morally obligated, and I think that still stands. I've got 813. Hi, who's this?
Hey, this is Kyle from Tampa.
Kyle, thanks for calling, man.
So I don't know if this necessarily qualifies as a moral question, but it's something that's sort of eaten at me recently, and I wanted to get your thoughts, and I think it does dip into the moral side of things. A couple minutes ago, sitting down with my dad at the fireplace, having a beer, we start talking, and he mentions years ago, my grandfather passed away, and he decided to bring up John Edwards, the scam, cold reading, that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the psychics, Sylvia Brown, telling you you're angels and everything else like that. And my dad tells me.
Let me jump in and explain. John Edwards is a professed psychic who has made millions of dollars claiming to be able to contact the dead. And he markets and panders essentially to people who are desperate to speak to long dead relatives, charging them a lot of money, getting a lot of celebrity by supposedly contacting deceased mothers, fathers, grandparents, etc. Would that be a fair assessment, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much dead on the money.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
That's exactly what he does.
Go ahead.
So I got to thinking, my dad's like, I kind of like what he does, if only because it is a nice feeling to think that, my grandfather, his father, is still looking down on us, trying to help in any way he can. And I had to sit there and explain to my dad that, no, he's not doing any of that. This is cold reading. He is making this shit up just on the spot. And, I basically walked my dad through the whole steps, and I could see him getting more and more sort of sad and almost angry. And it just went quiet the rest of the night. And I'm sitting here wondering to myself, am I the asshole for disillusioning my own father to a nice thought? It wasn't necessarily hurting him. He's not buying the guy's stuff. But, is it wrong to tell somebody that their ideas are at the very least wrong or harmful if it was helping them?
Well,
it's sort of the same thing that we hear with, religion and why are you taking my joy?
Thinking about this one, I've been rolling it over and over in my mind. I think a lot of it is situational. If I had an 85-year-old grandmother who was near the ending of her life and she had some kind of belief that gave her comfort and it wasn't actionable in the way that it was going out and harming anybody else, it was really like she was in her own little circle. Yeah, I wouldn't challenge that, and just let her believe, let her think. If it's delusional, whatever, it's one of those cost-benefit discussions. I think if we are in the arena where someone might be taken advantage of by that idea, or whatever that bad idea is can ripple out and negatively affect other people, I think that begins to ramp up the need for us to intervene. Robert Greene Ingersoll has that great quote, "The more false we destroy, the more room we make for the true." And I think if it's not true, it does matter. And I think that religious people have gotten so used to living without challenge, without being properly challenged, that, it's easy for them to do what your dad did, to get upset and to, feel betrayed maybe in some way. I don't know. But I myself think that if it's not true, that matters. At the very least, you're not telling him what he should think. You're just telling him your position and why and how you got there, so maybe that's a little less confrontational. But, if it's somebody who's living in a total cocoon and it doesn't matter and it's, the cost benefit's not worth it, I'd probably leave that alone. Every other scenario, I think, is fair game.
Oh, fair enough.
All right. Here's my scenario, my friend.
Something that I've been thinking about.
You are the person who owns the company that figured out the COVID-19 vaccine, okay? At great expense, you have developed the vaccine. You now have a way to prevent the coronavirus, but your business is about to go bankrupt from the effort. You put everything in to finding this prevention. You have a long waiting list of middle and upper class people, and they're willing to pay top dollar to get their vaccinations, which means you aren't going to go bankrupt. You'll be able to recoup your losses, maybe have a little extra money left over. But there's also a long waiting list of people who are not rich, who are people of poverty and even lower middle class people who simply cannot pay, but they desperately need the vaccine as much as anybody else. If you serve them, your business goes under. Who would get access to the COVID-19 vaccine first?
It's a difficult question. To me, I think, my answer would be release, all the details of the COVID vaccine freely to any company that wants to make it, and then immediately go serve the rich people, because it's still going to take time for other companies to look at, all this data and then figure out how to make it. But I got to keep the business running. So I think, it's the same similar idea that Volkswagen had in the 50s when they created the 3-point seatbelt. They didn't patent it. They released it to every company and said, this is a good safety feature, make it. They still had it first, but they did, in the end, create a viable safety feature. So I don't see why one probably couldn't do the similar thing with the COVID-19 vaccination.
So your solution would be make it open source.
At a moral level, yeah. It sucks that your business would go under, at least initially, but at the cost of how many lives you would save by creating this vaccine that everybody can see what's in it and making it widely available for everybody. But like I said, you could still technically sell it to those people who, wanted to fund your business. It's still going to take companies time to create their vaccines, and you've already got yours. So
it's actually a damn good answer. If you go forward and say, look, we expended everything getting where we are. Those who can support this vaccine financially, please do so. But we, in fairness, will not differentiate based on class. We want everyone to have access. I think that would be something of huge appeal to those of means who could help fill the gap. I think that's a great answer.
Oh, glad you posed it to me.
I appreciate you calling. Thanks for being a part of the show.
I got to get back to a meeting, so.
All right. I'll see you later. The ethical dilemma. Should you call a podcast at the office right before you're supposed to be in a meeting? I have questions about this. 970, hi, who's this?
Hi, this is Kathy in Colorado.
Hi, Kathy. Appreciate you listening so much. How you holding up out there in this crazy world?
Oh, well, let's see. I sit at home. I don't go outside. It's full of smoke and heat and crazy people. So I read, watch movies, and play bubble shooter on my Kindle.
And call podcasts to address ethical dilemmas.
Yes!
Yes. All right.
Yes, I listen to Seth.
I got one for you. Are you ready for me here?
Probably not, but shoot it at me.
Okay, here we go. You start your own social media company, okay? You have started your own version of Facebook, Twitter, whatever, okay? But it's yours, brand new social media company. People can debate, they can discuss, they can share information about whatever, and you get off to a great start. But then you start noticing people and organizations are more and more sharing misinformation, false and misleading claims. Some people do it by accident, other people on purpose. Propaganda, manipulation, clickbait, and you notice the misinformation and clickbait and bad stuff is getting a lot more attention than everything else. So, do you have an obligation to protect the free speech of everybody on your platform? Or do you claim a right to filter and even censor information that you deem not to be true or not in the public interest?
Ooh. Okay, let's see. I have a friend who used to work for the ACLU, and she would counter me on the free speech thing with if you take away one person's free speech, that your free speech could be next. Because if you don't allow all free speech, then you could lose all free speech. However, for myself personally, if I saw people putting things out there that were harmful, you know, there's people that post stuff about, oh, you should kill yourself, you know, and that's a really, really harmful, horrible thing to be happening. And, yeah, free speech, but you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater.
Okay, hang on, hold on. Hold, please. Hang on. I got to jump in as the host, right? So what I heard at first was you're a free speech absolutist. People should be able to say whatever they're going to say. And in the arena of ideas, it's the responsibility of everybody else to vet those ideas. Would that be an accurate representation of what you said?
I think so.
People should be able to say whatever they're going to say, and the ideas can rise and fall on merit or lack of merit out there. But the ideas can and should be heard in a free speech society.
Yes, that is true. It's the dilemma of allowing white supremacists to spout their evil stuff simply because if you don't allow them to say theirs, then why should you then be allowed to say yours? But I then personally have a problem with allowing that. So if it were my social media myself, I would be vetting this stuff, and if it's harmful and if it's a lie and it's going to hurt people, it's my social media platform, I would kick them off.
So you would have a gatekeeping mechanism for trying to reduce or eliminate rogue elements spreading misinformation and disinformation.
Yes, but that also means that I put myself in the position of making those decisions as to who's right and who's wrong, which is in itself a dilemma.
It really is. We subjective human beings, it's not always cut and dry. Where does the line get drawn? Those types of things. But I think you and I line up. You know, I don't owe somebody else a platform, especially a private platform. I do. You know, I know Hitch. I keep talking about him because I've had him on my mind recently, but was more of a free speech absolutist, you know. And I think I agree with, I hate the idea of somebody else determining which ideas I get to hear and not hear. But I think I'm speaking more from a philosophical point of view in that regard. If it comes to the spreading of outright lies that may harm people. We've been talking about COVID. That's a great example. Vaccine misinformation actually harms people. Then I think I've got every right to say, no, I'll pull the plug. I'm going to block, ban. You have no access to this platform, and I can do so without regret or apology.
Yeah. On your Facebook page, people sometimes will come on and start saying things that are stupid or against the stuff that you believe. And the next thing you know, and I always get a kick out of it, and you do a bye-bye and you're gone and you kick them off. You know, you close the gate. And, you know, so it's like, I love when you do that. But
now, hang on. You're talking about when I see somebody on my personal Facebook page. I block very, very few people anyway, certainly on TTA. But on my personal page, if somebody comes on and they're just an awful person and they're a bad agent or they're spreading misinformation or whatever, I'm not obligated to listen to those people, to entertain those people.
No.
They don't get to set up in my virtual living room. Bye. Have a nice day. You're out of here, and I'm going to make room for somebody else. No question. And you like that.
You do that. Oh, yeah, I giggle.
The band hammer amuses
like
you.
I'm doing now.
I see.
It does. I'm going, you go, Seth.
I banish thee into the phantom zone. Well,
Be gone.
Well, I really don't do a lot of it. I use the mute button a lot more than I use pretty much anything out there. Blocking people for me, it's after a while it becomes this exercise, and it's almost a comedy because people then screenshot the block and they're like, "Oh, look, Seth Andrews isn't interested in speech, blah blah blah," and I just don't give them that oxygen. It's rare that I block somebody, but I will. And, you know, you and I don't owe them that, and I think we align on that question. Good stuff. Thank you so much for calling and being a part of the conversation today, okay?
Okay, thanks, Seth.
All
Bye.
right. See you later. She likes it when I drop the band hammer on people. It's rare when that happens. It's just, who's got time to, you know what I'm saying, sit around and, I mean, we got 300,000 people on the YouTube channel, and we got 250,000 people on the freaking Facebook. Who's got time to manage all that? You know, and if someone's being abusive and it's brought to my attention, they're out. Bam. But beyond that, I mean, who's got time? I got content to produce. I've got, I've got fish to fry, so to speak. It's been an interesting show. I hope it has sort of fired up the synapses as we get philosophical about ethical and moral conundrums. Be safe. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you back here next time. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.